I want to try to move through this as quickly as we possibly can. You should have an agenda in front of you, so the first order of business should be to call the meeting to order. I'm calling the meeting to order.
All right.
And beyond that, Nate, if you could call the roll.
Absolutely. Start with the roll for the November 21st meeting of the Charter Review Commission. Start with Judge Ron Avery.
Here.
Honorable Mayor Tom Persiak. Claire Rosaco.
Here.
Victor Ruiz.
Here.
Davida Russell will be joining us by phone in just a moment. Dennis Kennedy.
Here.
The Honorable Mayor Susan Drucker.
Here.
And Diane Downing. All right, we have a quorum.
Very good. The minutes were distributed. Did everybody get a chance to read them? Okay. Is there any addition or correction to the minutes that needs to be made? If there is none, can I get a motion to accept the minutes as distributed?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Properly moved and seconded. Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Between,
Sorry.
whoa. You know, I feel so disembodied up here all by myself. It's like a floating head.
Hello.
Hi, Davida. We have you online.
Okay. Hello. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
We've just finished.
I'm
roll
good.
Okay.
Okay, I'm putting you on mute.
Okay, so Davida, we hadn't even started to discuss it. We didn't want to say anything before we had you associated with us, so you wouldn't feel that we cut you out of even so much as 1 minute out of this.
I appreciate it.
All righty, and we are now down to discussion about our process and updating everybody on it, and to talk about the structure of what we're going to do as far as the work moving forward, and how we plan to receive transmissions of recommendations to County Council, and a time frame for that. So we updated the process to receive feedback and proposals to the commission, and first we scheduled this meeting for public officials, advocates, and agency heads to share their proposals, and they've been invited and briefed to submit a written summary and prepare a statement limited to 5 minutes at today's meeting. The purpose is to raise the issue and define the problem that needs to be fixed. It's not to propose a solution today. Am I accurate here? Nate? Okay. You want to kind of weigh in?
Sure,
Nate?
I'd be glad to. So the commission will remember, and some folks in the audience will remember, that we got some feedback about process at the last commission meeting. And so we used that feedback and changed the process this way. First, today's meeting is for public officials, advocates, and others that are folks that are used to participating in a public process as part of their job. And what we did was we solicited those folks as best we could through a direct solicitation to most all elected officials, also to mailing lists, media lists that are typically engaged in county government. And we asked them to submit a one-page summary of the problem that they'd like to address. And those are in your agenda. All of those folks have been invited to speak today. And they've been asked to speak for 5 minutes only to define the problem. At the next meeting in December, we've asked for members of the public to have that same opportunity. So that meeting will be a little bit different in that we anticipate moving it to a more convenient location, maybe having it start a little bit later so that folks that work on ordinary work schedules will be able to access that meeting more easily. We've also invited folks from the public to submit the same one-pager. A couple of those have come in. Those are also part of your agenda. They'll be included in the agenda next meeting. The way that we've approached that is also through the same mail email and publicity that today's attendees received word, but also through general media. We got some hits in the Plain Dealer and also social media, and it's driven some, what I'd say, modest traffic as far as submissions. So there's only been one more than is in your agenda today. All of the folks that submit will be invited to be part of the agenda at the next meeting. Also, members of the public will be always able to speak at any meeting as part of the public session. So a little bit formal, a little bit informal, chocolate and peanut butter of the Charter Review Commission. So that is the approach. And then today, we will hear from 5 invited speakers and then have open to public. I've asked all of the invitees to prepare to speak for no more than 5 minutes on their topic. Again, the approach is just define the problem. The rationale is we want to, as a commission, identify what our priorities are so that we can dig deep on those priorities and not every proposal. So we'll hear everything that is proposed today. In our January meeting, we'll apply the criteria to rank which ones we think should be the ones that we focus on for the first and second quarter of 18, ultimately with the goal of making recommendations to County Council in June of 18 for them to agree to all of them, put them on the ballot, and have them pass.
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. And so that brings us to the invited speakers.
First up is Marcia Goldberg of the League of Women Voters. Her one-page proposal, Marcia, you can join us at the dais. If you would press the button when it's yellow, the mic is on. When it's off is when you can say nasty things about me.
Well, you've been great, Nate.
Well, tell my wife. And all attendees have a one-pager that they submitted ahead of time in your agendas.
So I'm not sure if you'd like me to read over what I submitted. For the sake of the rest of the room, we would like to see, and I see that Mr. Miller would also like to see, a charter mandating the independent office of Inspector General. Right now, it is it's legislated. It's not part of the charter. Just to make sure you understand what the League is, we're a nonpartisan political organization. We advocate for good government at all levels. The charter currently states that the county executive may appoint an inspector general. The charter should instead state that an inspector general shall be appointed by the executive and confirmed by county council. The IG must be clearly designated in the charter as the chief ethics officer of the county, and independence should be guaranteed by means of the following. 1, the IG's term of office should be staggered from that of the executive, and the IG should be removable only for cause by a supermajority of council members after a fair hearing process. The IG should have charter-guaranteed dedicated funding, that is, a fee schedule for certain IG services or registries, and adequate investigatory tools, for instance, the power to compel evidence or witnesses, that is, subpoena power. Currently, the IG's chief ethics enforcement tools are letters of warning or admonition and the referring of cases after toothless investigation, in our opinion, to other bodies for adjudication or sanction. While County Council has created by ordinance a strong county agency of Inspector General, adding a mandate to the charter would embed the office in our governing document and make certain that the IG is not serving at the pleasure of the very officers the IG may one day need to investigate. Because the IG function is somewhat parallel to the internal auditing function, we expect the Commission would want to place it as a separate article in the charter just after internal auditing. I have brought the chair of our county government committee, who also, well, that's on the next one we're going to propose. But Linda Mayer knows a great deal about the background because she worked extensively on the creation of the charter. So if you have any questions about this, I'd really like her to take the questions. No? Okay.
As we said, today's purpose is just to outline the nature
Okay.
of the issue and to get an idea as to what's being proposed. And we're going to talk about solutions later, so we'll,
Okay.
in all probability, invite you back after we've had some of those discussions in order to fine-tune where we are and where we're going.
Great.
Okay,
That's fine. You all understand what
got it.
it's about. Okay. Do you want me to just move on to the next one?
Please.
Again, Linda Mayer took part, she headed up our state study of primary elections. And we came up with this proposal based on the results of our state study, a statewide study by the League of Women Voters on how primaries are handled across Ohio, but we looked at states all over and cities all over the country. So we are proposing that nonpartisan primaries be held for all county posts, with top 2 general elections replacing partisan primaries. The League of Women Voters of Ohio has studied primary systems across the country at all levels of government. We concluded that nonpartisan primaries are more appropriate than partisan primaries at the county and local government levels, where administrative matters far outweigh rare ideological differences. In the years since this new government was formed, we have not seen many county governance issues that activate the partisan divide. Extremely welcome. Council members from both parties work hard to uphold efficiency and fiscal responsibility, and they support the health and human services needs of the county's sickest and poorest residents. Currently, only the voters who belong to the stronger political party in the county for the executive and county prosecuting attorney or in their district for council members have a chance to make their votes count in the primary. General elections feature candidates who are unopposed or races that are not meaningfully contested. Nonpartisan primaries followed by top 2 general elections would restore competitiveness and give all voters a voice in both rounds of voting. This is not something we suggest above the county level in Ohio, but the county level on down to municipalities is where we would like to see those at all times. Most of our municipalities are run nonpartisan primaries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilman Miller?
Good afternoon, Honorable Judge Adrian and distinguished members of the Charter Review Commission. This proposed amendment here aims to ensure permanent status for the Inspector General's office by incorporating language about the Inspector General into the county charter. The amendment creates a new Article 15 establishing the Inspector General as a charter agency and setting forth the qualifications for appointment, term, process for removal, and process for filling vacancies. This proposed language has a long history. I played a role, but former County Councilman Dave Greenspan, Mike King, and the 2012-13 Charter Review Commission played a greater role. Shortly after the start of the new government, we created the Inspector General's office by ordinance. Council considered an Inspector General amendment prior to the 2012-13 Charter Review Commission, but decided to give the issue more time and see what the CRC recommended. The 2012-13 Charter Review Commission recommended an Inspector General amendment, a version stronger than this one. In addition to provisions similar to those presented here, it also provided confidentiality provisions, subpoena powers, and dedicated funding. There was not sufficient support on County Council to place the proposed amendment on the ballot. A bare-bones version was also considered and rejected, one which created the Inspector General's office in the charter but left almost everything else to be done by ordinance. Over the next 3 years, Councilman Greenspan and I developed versions which took a middle ground, providing considerably more specifics than the bare-bones version, but not as much as in the 2012 to 13 CRC version. We came close to obtaining sufficient support to place the issue on the ballot. The amendment proposed here, of which you have a copy on the last page of my presentation, is essentially the same as the latest version that Council considered with dates properly updated. It has 5 key provisions. 1 establishes the Inspector General as the Chief Ethics Officer of the county, stating that the Council will define powers and duties by ordinance. 2nd establishes qualifications, 10 years experience as CPA, internal auditor, licensed attorney, law enforcement officer, or other investigator. 3 provides for a 4-year term with the next term starting January 1st, 2020, that is staggered with the executive's term as recommended by the League, with appointment by the executive subject to confirmation by council. 4 provides for removal during term only by 8 members of council. And 5 provides that if a vacancy occurs in midterm, the executive shall appoint a replacement for the remainder of the term subject to confirmation by council. Also provides that if the vacancy occurs with less than 2 years left in the term, the executive may appoint for the remainder of term and the next term, subject to council confirmation. It is now more than 10 years since the investigation of the county corruption scandal started. There is a risk that commitment to having such an inspector general could wane as memory of the scandal recedes into the background. The IG office has proven effective. Among other things, the county is undertaking a major effort to effectively collect economic development loan repayments. This resulted from an IG investigation. I urge your commission to recommend this language to incorporate the Inspector General into the county charter, giving it permanent status. I also recommend that you consider the stronger provisions included in the League of Women Voters version, the dedicated funding source, subpoena powers, etc., and recommend to the council the specific version that you believe will be most effective. Thank you very much for your consideration of my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. So just so I'm clear, you've discussed this version with the folks from the League of Women Voters, or you've just compared them?
I just compared them. We have not, they brought theirs entirely independently.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Southerington. Good afternoon.
Thank you. I'll say it again. Rebecca Kopczynski. I'm the Director of the Personnel Review Commission. I'm here on behalf of Debbie Southerington, our chair today, but I have along with me another one of our commissioners, Alan Bozeman, behind me, and Albert Bouchahine, who's the manager of classification compensation. All 3 of us, I think, would be happy to entertain any questions you may have at the end of this. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today on behalf of the commission. We did participate in this process last time. We were a new agency, and looking forward to going through the process again. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and try to stay under this 5-minute guideline. But I want to start by giving you just a little bit of background about the PRC. We were established in the original ordinance, and as the Human Resource Commission, actually, we've had a name change since that time. We've been operational since 2011. Early in 2011, we had 3 commissioners who were appointed by the previous county executive, and those commissioners began their work in March of that year. And one of the first actions they took at that time was to delegate many of their responsibilities under the charter to the Human Resources Department under the county executive at the time. That was later rescinded in 2015 because by that time we had come up to the point that we were fully staffed, that we could fulfill all of our responsibilities under the charter. But it did take some time, and the immediate focus of the commission
was to address the appeals that had been filed largely that were driven by the reorganization. So since that time, we have resolved about 97% of those appeals. We've had about 370 that have been presented to our commission, but we have shifted the focus of our efforts to some more of the recent operations that we have taken on. We have been engaged in what I tell people is conservative but consistent growth since we started, as we have gradually grown to fulfill the scope of our charter responsibilities. And just to give you a little bit of an insight into what happened the last time we went through charter review, we did have a name change. We went from the Human Resource Commission to the Personnel Review Commission. We also had a change in the appointment authority. It shifted from the county executive to county council. That was an initiative that was driven by county council. They felt it was very important that the people on this commission were perceived as independent from the county executive when they were hearing and ruling on appeals that were presented by employees of the county executive. And furthermore, we asked for, and the voters approved, further clarification of the role of the Department of HR, which helped to delineate the functions between the PRC and the HR department at the time. So it was a very productive process from our perspective. We do have, we do have 4 general realms of operations in our agency at this point. They're pretty closely aligned with language in the charter. 9.01 gives the PRC responsibility for administering an employment system based on merit and fitness. We operationalize this by conducting the civil service testing for the classified positions in the county. 9.021 gives us authority to resolve appeals from classified employees regarding certain employment actions of the county executive and the county appointing authorities. 9.022 gives us responsibility for administration of compliance with state and federal laws on personnel matters. And 9.03, we administer the county's classification and compensation systems for non-bargaining unit employees. As of 2015, we are pretty well staffed in order to fulfill this scope of responsibilities. Our concerns are threefold. The first of which is there is no mention of civil service anywhere in the code, in the charter as it stands today. We understood from our early discussions with the people who were involved with the preparation and development of this charter that they didn't want there to be a perception that this was a traditional civil service commission because they did assign additional responsibilities to it. So they left that terminology out. We think that the terms merit and fitness are less in the vernacular of people who work for the county, but they understand civil service, and we think it's time to reinsert some language about civil service into the charter. The second issue that we have is a concern about the language that's in 9.02, which again pertains to this responsibility that we have for administration of compliance with federal and state laws regarding personnel matters. The people who actually fulfill that duty, that administer and interpret those laws and fulfill that compliance, actually work for the county executive. They don't work for the PRC. So the way that we have operationalized this is in line with the second recommendation that we have for a proposed amendment, and that is to add some language to this provision that clarifies that the way that we do this is that we have taken responsibility for conducting a number of reviews and audits, that we issue reports and recommendations about, that we present to our commissioners, and then subsequently to both the county executive and to the county council. And we've been doing that since about early 2015. And number 3, our last concern is that there's a lack of defined list of positions that are in the unclassified service, and more importantly, I think, lack of a transparent process for the creation of new unclassified positions. We've had a lot of dialogue with the current administration about this. We know that we have some different opinions about this, and we expect there to be some robust discussion about those different opinions about this. But one of the things that we did was to look around at the other charter entities in this county, the cities that have established civil service commissions, and what we found, I think we have a chart here somewhere, I'm not sure where it is, but Albert, if you could distribute that. What we found is that by and large, the charter cities around the county have language in their charters that delineate those positions that are in the unclassified service, and furthermore delineate those that are in the classified service. And we think that that would be a helpful step forward for the county as they continue to address their personnel needs going forward. That's pretty much the end of my presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
That's a pretty good 5-minute run.
Thank you. I practiced.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much. Mr. Budish.
Thank you. And once again, I want to thank all the members of this commission for their service on this commission. The charter is the constitution of the county and emphasizes the important governmental priorities of the county. The charter was initially written and adopted in the reorganization of the government, and it generally is quite good. But there are a few things that experience has shown us that need adjusting. Today I'm presenting the one that to me is the most important. The charter encompasses a vision of a better, more prosperous and safe community. To achieve that, the county must have excellent human resources. The social workers protecting our children and seniors, our law enforcement personnel, our economic development staff, our 911 dispatchers, our administrators, managers, and supervisors, all must be comprised of the best and most talented persons available. I've charged the Human Resources Department of the county with doing everything we can to attract, develop, and retain the best possible talent. To do this, the county needs a modern and effective Human Resources Department that is strategic and accountable. Human resources strategy must be aligned with the goals of the organization. Strategy regarding recruiting, developing, evaluating, and compensating employees must also align with the budget and must be able to adapt to changing circumstances. A central problem with the charter is that it does not effectively delineate between the roles of the Personnel Review Commission and the Department of Human Resources. In a nutshell, the charter language does not sufficiently recognize that a county can have only one human resources department, and that department must be under the authority of the county executive. Instead, we now have a civil service commission, an adjudicative body that operates as a human resources department but outside of county management. The PRC performs an important function, many important functions as a matter of fact, but cannot serve as a lead in the development and administration of HR strategies. We believe the charter should clearly state that the role of the PRC is to adjudicate employee appeals and to conduct testing so that employees entering the county's classified service are qualified and have been found fit to serve through a competitive process. But the PRC cannot be directing internal promotions or redefining job roles and dictating budget increases as a result. Again, our goal is to make Cuyahoga County an employer of choice, to attract, develop, and retain the best possible talent. This is the only way we can meet the charter's vision of making Cuyahoga County a better place to live and work for all the residents of our community. So I'm requesting that this commission prioritize the amendment of the charter to recognize that the Department of Human Resources can be the county's only human resources department, and the Personnel Review Commission should serve the purposes that I discussed earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
This is Davita Russell.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to thank Mr. Budish for the clarification of that procedure. As being labor and part of classified workers and representing them, I would definitely appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask just two questions, and perhaps you can give me some guidance, Mr. Budish, and perhaps Mr. Miller can give me some guidance also. When this structure was originally set up at the institution of charter government, was there some rationale, or was there some sort of legislative history, for lack of a better term, as to why they decided to do it the way that they did?
I think that I'll answer from the best of my knowledge. Of course, I wasn't in this position at that time. Mm-hmm. The change in county government, as you know, was spurred by a series of scandals And I believe that the decision to change the form of the government and what's in the charter in many ways results from that, including the language with respect to the Personnel Review Commission. The language, I think both the PRC and us agree that the language is not clear, and that has created the challenges that we face. And in most ways, the Charter Review Commission and the Human Resources Department have worked together very well in connection, for example, with the testing that the Charter Review, that the PRC mentioned in testimony. When I have spoken to members to people who were involved in the creation of this language in the charter, it is my understanding that from them that they did not anticipate the way this has come about to basically have almost a duplicative human resources department. I do not believe that was the intent. I do not believe the intent was to take power away or the ability of the HR department and the executive branch to be able to determine its own budget. I mean, right now we get a list of changes in classifications that result potentially in significant changes in a budget, which we can't be without the power to determine our own budget. So I think that there were a number of things that were not anticipated in the language that was created, and that's why I think both us and the PRC are asking for a clarification of the language.
Yes.
So when you're doing a compensation scale or a classification scale, does that have to be approved by council, or is it, or just the PRC dictates that? And
No, generally the
process?
PRC makes the recommendation to council.
okay, so council ultimately, whatever the PRC does, it's always a recommendation to council, and they ultimately vote on it?
Not whatever they do, but in that context, that is the case.
And what about interviewing, civil service? Does the PRC do any interviewing of any kind?
There are
Service positions?
there's a testing process, and in some of the cases there is an interviewing process.
I think what would be helpful, because I know this was one of the subjects when I was first asked to consider being on this commission, that when I read through the charter, that I found that I had questions about. So I think what would be helpful, and the highlights are great, but I think it would be really helpful if we're going to delve into this, if this is going to be one of the priorities, I think it would be really helpful if you can specify what does the PRC do? What are all, even though it sounds very detailed, but it'd be helpful to know what do you do interviews, establishing compensation?
I think both the PRC will, I'm sure, want to go through that, and we will certainly plan
And
to
then
do
whatever
that.
your HR does, just to see what services are duplicated, what are isolated, and is there a service that maybe the PRC should be doing that shouldn't be in HR, and vice versa? Maybe there's something in PRC that really shouldn't be there, it should be with your HR department. But I think we need a clear division of what is going on. If you want to define the two roles, I think we need
Yes.
to know what each group is
I
actually
think
doing.
both of us would be happy to do that.
Right.
I think it would be real useful for us to have a kind of a compare and contrast kind of document that we can kind of lay down side by side to take a look at what each entity thinks, are the points of contention, if that's the right word
Absolutely.
to say.
I think that, today my understanding was that this was just sort of give you the overall nutshell of what our issue is, and then we'd come back and give you more detail.
Yeah, I know I wasn't expecting you to do
Okay.
it today. I'm just saying, as we're moving forward to the next stage of things, I think that would be extremely useful for us to be able to fully understand the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because otherwise, this is the kind of stuff that could cause your eyes to glaze over and roll back into your head.
Right.
Okay, good enough. Yes.
And also then, if, to come back, just what do you think what would PRC think HR should be handling, and what do you think PRC should be handling that they may not be doing that they may or may not be doing as well. So I would just be looking for a lot of that clarification, just so that we have a better idea of if we're going to suggest an amendment, then we can clearly define that as well.
We'll be happy to do that.
And again, just for my own clarification, it would be useful for me too if there were examples of, places where, I'm not gonna say that you bumped heads, but where the lines were unclear, and what kind of issues that gave rise to, from both sides. I think that would help us get to clarification and help us design the right kind of language if we're going to talk about amending and making recommendations for amendment.
We'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, are we? So can we do public input? Okay. So we're going to open the floor for public input. If there's any to be had on today's date.
We have Mr. William Tartar Jr.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, the commission members, and honored guest. So William Tartar Jr. And I guess my first request would be a correction to the minutes. My last name is Tartar, Tarter, and it is spelled the way that it sounds, but I frequently get tartar sauce, tartar control crest, teeter tartar. I've kind of heard it all, so it's a common
I
misunderstanding.
feel your pain.
So I appreciate that on a lighter note.
The Adrian, Adrin, and Ardrin. I think I stopped.
On a more serious note, I really appreciate the commentary that has been provided around the Office of the Inspector General, and that's something that for us who were on the commission back then, we felt very strongly about that, and that is something that I would hope that our experience and conversation from the last Charter Review Commission will be helpful in any type of deliberations that this body has regarding the future role of the IG, whether or not to incorporate it into the charter, and if so, what type of language is used. So I just wanted to make myself available, and of course my colleague Davida was on there as well, but that's something that we all felt very strongly about and would support anything like that. So I look forward to submitting a form for the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
That's it.
That's it? That's it? Okay. Well, hopefully that means that we're doing a good job. And this is very helpful, at least up to this point in time. It really kind of allows us to identify the universe of what we're dealing with and give us kind of a scope of where we need to put our efforts and what's important, at least up to this point. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when we open it up to the rest of the public and see if there are any additional things. Having gone through this now, this being the third or fourth time, I think a lot of the thornier things have either been discarded or have been enacted or have been addressed. And if that's the case, then hopefully we'll be able to give a lot of time and attention to the things that remain. That would be great. So I guess we're at the point where I should ask whether there's anything else for the good of the order.
I had a question with the next meeting. Are we moving it to 5:30? Is that,
So we talked about having it later in the day. It's currently scheduled for 5:30, and we have a location secured currently at Tri-C. We'll send that out. But I also want to do a quick survey to see if I can find a location that's even better to access and cheaper.
We will just have one meeting for the public or two?
Just one.
As of right now. Okay. I mean, at this juncture, we're looking at the better part of, what, 3 weeks to get there?
Yep.
Okay,
And we'll do another push for solicitation and drive more interest.
okay. Let's see what we come up with. I'd like to see us pump up the volume a little bit so we can make sure that everybody who might want to give input knows that we're actually out here and that we're able to receive it, given the tight turnaround time that we have ultimately in order to get everything done. You know, I think that it's a reasonable schedule, but given the number of issues, or maybe the lack thereof, that we have, you know, I think we can see whether or not it makes sense after we have the next meeting to hold it open for a while. We'll just see how things play out. My only real concern is that I have a long scheduled vacation that ends on December the 6th. So I won't probably be here. Maybe I'll be able to do like Davida and Skype in or something. So may have to have a vice chair take the chair for me that time. And we'll kick you upstairs. Okay. If there is nothing further at this time, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Question?
Yes.
This is Davina. I'm sorry. I just want a clarification on our next meeting date. Are we having one in December?
December the 6th.
Okay. All right. I thought, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I thought I missed it.
Consider myself to be the monkey that stops the show. So we will hold our meeting on December the 6th. Still looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moving second, we stand adjourned. Thank you, folks.